Introduce it.
This is called The Battle of Waterloo. He was surprised at the normality of it all. Rising at 7, breakfast at 7:30, the silence of early morning disturbed only by the rustle of the morning paper as his wife scanned the society gossip column. No change there. He knew that Tricia was not a morning person. Come to think of it, she really wasn't an evening person either. But recently she seemed to have detached herself entirely from the reality of their relationship. As the 8:15 to Waterloo shuddered to a halt, he noticed that it was 4 minutes late, then nodding to some of his fellow travellers, sat down with the paper in his window seat. Leaning his head back on the grey velour headrest, he began to plan his day. Here he was, carrying on with his normal routine, while Tricia ensconced herself in her little world of coffee mornings and flower arranging. There was no need for her to find out, not yet anyway. Tricia prodded the telephone digits with a well-manicured forefinger. This is Mrs. Reid. I would like to speak to my husband, please. There was a long pause. Then a voice she recognised as one of her husband's colleagues responded. Mrs. Reid, I'm afraid your husband is no longer with this company. You see, there were several redundancies on the management team, and he was one of them. She felt a slight nausea now rising in her stomach. The voice at the other end sounded distant and unreal. Words began to swim around her head and became wildly out of context. Cost effective, streamlining the company. More than 6 weeks now. She replaced the receiver and slumped back into her armchair. As usual, he got the 5:15 from Waterloo and smiled as the train pulled in right in time. It hadn't been a bad day, really. The interview had gone quite well. Although the young man conducting the interview looked about 17, which made him feel all of his 57 years, but the boy had been pleasant enough. He ate his sandwiches sitting on a bench in the park and then paid a visit to the National Science Museum. He knew a job would turn up soon, all would be well. Life was trundling on without a ripple on the pool. He checked his watch as he opened the front door, then hung up his coat and umbrella. It was then he saw Tricia standing there in the hall, her face drawn and her eyes coldly accusing. Why didn't you tell me? She said, her voice shrill and wavering. At least we could have talked about it. Wearily he sat down, his eyes scanning the pattern on the hall carpet as if he was looking for something he'd lost. When did you and I last talk to each other? Really talk, he said. It wasn't always like this. Her voice sounded strained, and yet there was a hint of something he recognised, something long forgotten. Tenderness, perhaps. He raised his eyes to show her that he was still listening. You were always so engrossed in your work, she said. You became so predictable, so boring, so old. He was startled by her outburst, and yet he felt stimulated by the raw energy of her emotions. He looked across at her with a look of dawning admiration in his eyes. She leaned over and covered his hand with hers. Listen, I need more purpose to my life. I'm only 47 and I'm so bored. She said it quietly and without malice. I want to feel worthwhile. more appreciated. I want to play an important part in our relationship. Do you understand what I'm trying to say? He did understand, and he nodded reassuringly. As they walked upstairs, a plan began to formulate in his head. He was surprised at how normal everything seemed. Breakfast at 7:30, a pale sun streaming in through the kitchen window, sparkling off the marmalade jar and turning it into crystal. The Guardian propped against the coffee pot, and lightly done toast springing from the toaster. All was well. It would be a good day, he knew it. He looked at his watch and wondered if the train would be on time. In the hall, he kissed his wife tenderly, opened the door, and then closed it gently. Glancing at the kitchen clock, he then checked his watch and smiled to himself, knowing that Tricia would be in plenty of time for the 18:15 to Waterloo. He's put her to work.